Good afternoon. My name is Bernie Sherlock and I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon for this choral clinic and for the invitation from Peter Stobart, the new festival director, to myself and 4 singers from Chamber Choir Ireland, whom you've probably just heard singing in their concert on Friday evening. First of all, Charlotte Trapez, who's the soprano, and she is a graduate of the Royal Northern College of Music, and she's also an experienced soloist. Leanne Fitzgerald is a graduate of the TU Conservatoire, which is my home base, and she's also a member of a very well-known Irish a cappella group called Ardu. Christopher Bowen is from New Zealand. We're very exotic today. Christopher is a highly experienced soloist in both opera and oratorio. He spent 10 years in BBC Singers, and he's sung with many other ensembles. And finally, last but not least, Paul McGough, who is also a member of the Crooks Ensemble, who, their claim to fame, they provided music for Vikings, and also a very well-known and award-winning barbershop quartet called Four in a Bar. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to start off with a question from a Venezuelan choir. How could we keep the pitch while we make movements along a performance? I believe very much in movement in any performance. I love the idea of bodies being free and at ease. So movement can only be a good thing. But I understand where this question is coming from. Sometimes choirs have to spread right out. I did a piece some years ago with 16 parts, and the instruction from the score is to separate all around the audience. And sometimes that can cause issues with intonation. I suppose what I have done in the past is I have asked a number of singers to use a tuning fork. So singers I can depend on that I know will help if something isn't quite right. And then obviously if I have a dependable singer with perfect pitch, that works well also. But I might hand over to Christopher, since he is such an experienced opera singer, and as an opera singer, you're moving all the time.
I think it's really good if the movements that you have come from within the piece, because then the movement will help with the piece and not interfere with the intonation. But like any ensemble situation, I think it's listening to the bass line in the group and making sure that's rock solid. I don't know how they do it, but that's always what I rely on when I'm performing.
So I'm going to ask my 4 singers to stand up, and we're going to sing a little bit of Wade in the Water, a tune that everybody will know. And I'm going to ask you to do what I would often get choirs to do, which is to feel the pulse. So because we're in this beautiful cathedral, I think the floorboards might be a little bit too noisy to ask them to stand. So I'm going to ask them just to lean on a foot, like let's say right, left, right, left. Yes, something like that. So at a more basic level, you could do this as walking, as you're singing it. Here we go. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Very good, thank you. And so anybody who doesn't have a strong inner pulse is going to feel it much more if their body is moving. So you can go to the next level of tapping or clicking. But sometimes if I'm conducting and singers in a choir are actually doing that, I get distracted because it's not at exactly the same time. So we just have to be careful with that we're not deluded into thinking, oh, everybody's feeling that because they're tapping a beat if it's not exactly in time. Let's just try that with this. We'll subdivide it, because that's maybe the harder thing to do is to break it down to the smallest note value. In this, it's a quaver. So to get the singers to actually tap the quaver, and then they really know the length of each note. So let's go again. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children. Good, thank you. And I'm going to ask you to add one more thing into it, because maybe it's not so much part of ensemble, but it's presentation. That is just to feel it a little bit more in your body, yeah? So whatever you want to do, doesn't matter. Try to feel it. 2, 3, 4. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Excellent, thank you. And we're going to have a look at another piece. This is an interesting arrangement of Hark the Herald. So it's called Hark in 7. So instead of the usual Hark the Herald, actually I can't sing it the right way now. Hark the Herald because the 7 is in my head. Art herald angel. So this is the 7/8 time. So let's slow it down a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to tap on your thigh. Some people like to do it here because it's very close to where they're breathing from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah? Okay, here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Thank you, that's fine. So they're just reading this, and that's really good, so because on the second page it changes from 7. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2. So there are a lot of changes. Anybody?
All those time signature changes are inspired by the text, aren't they?
Yes.
So it's feeling the text together, and all the consonants that you spend some time on, be it a sound or sound, that really helps the ensemble too, if you can feel those together.
Absolutely. And all kind of through the body. Okay, next question. How could we improve our breathing support in order to make a clear and cohesive sound? It's a really good question. My first answer is know your body, know your own body, both in terms of trying to relax your own body, but also how the breathing apparatus works. So there can't be any tension from your ankles, your knees, your hips, your shoulders, your neck, your tongue can't be tense. That can cause terrible problems because it takes up a whole lot of space, and jaws, everything should be relaxed. But I suppose what I find most useful for developing breathing technique is exercises where there's a kind of a closed mouth. The fancy term for it now is semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. In my day, it was just you closed your mouth a bit. So that can be from the tongue trill, the lip trill, even a raspberry, or using a straw. They're all things that impede the airflow so that there's less pressure on the vocal cords. So it's really good to warm up the vocal cords and really good to help moving through the different ranges. So I'm going to ask you to pretend, we'll start with the straw because some people find it very hard to do with their tongue or with their lips. But if you put a straw in your mouth, everybody can blow into a straw. So can I ask you to pretend you have a straw. I actually have one, a very cool one because it's metal, because we're not allowed to use plastic anymore. So a paper straw or a metal straw. So can you reduce the size? I can sing. A little bit of sliding, just up a fifth. And up a semitone. Very good. And we would go up the scale like that, explore the range, because it also prepares the higher notes, makes it much easier to sing them. The whole point being it's like in a swimming pool where your muscles are not under pressure. It's a very safe environment and nothing happens, there's no collision. Same with the vocal cords, it's very gentle. Okay, I'm just going to do one other exercise with you. Well, actually, we should do a little bit of shouldn't we? Why don't we sing a bit of Sally Gardens? Because that's the thing that you can apply to your singing by doing whatever your choral piece in 4 parts or more parts, or you can do it to unison melody. So let's just sing Sally Gardens. We do the first phrase and the second phrase, and then we'll stop, because that's the B phrases next. Yeah, here we go. So I wish they weren't so good, because if they were normal, somebody would be doing, they would be over pushing the air, but they're all doing it perfectly. So that's one of the points about this exercise, that it doesn't need to be forceful. It's not. And it really develops the airflow as well, steady airflow. If you don't have a good steady airflow, you're going to have you won't be able to do it. Sometimes I suggest putting 2 fingers in the side of the mouth. That might make it a bit easier, but if anyone has a problem with it, I think the straw, again, straw phonation is the trendy term for it, but it's just blowing into a straw, just reducing the size. Let's do the first phase and the second phase of Sally Gardens. First with the tongue, and second with lip trill. Let's try and not breathe the next one. Let's have a go. It's harder. It's too hard. Let's breathe. Very good. I'm going to pass over to Charlotte because she's a singing teacher as well.
Well, as singers and teachers, we use so many different images or ideas to help our students or other singers understand how we use our breath as best we can. And it's, as Bernie says, it's about an awareness of your body. So the first thing is that often singers will find that their breaths can get quite high the more they're singing, and so you want to feel as grounded in your body and your breath be as grounded as possible. And I think it's useful to be reminded that our body is a 360 sort of piece of equipment. It's not just the front that you're thinking about. You've also got your back, which is such a useful muscle and anchor for your breath. So when you're breathing in, think about breathing in 360, not just into your stomach or into your lungs, really filling your body as low and as anchored as possible. And then, as Bernie was saying, with all those lip trill exercises, it's all about steady airflow. And I like to use the image of a wheel gently spinning or gently rolling to keep that idea that the air is always really steady in its flow. You're not pushing it or you're not holding your breath. And that's something that's quite common as well, is people hold their breath as they're singing. They think there's not much breath left, so they restrict it. And actually, there's often more breath left in your body than you think there is.
Yeah, I actually wanted to jump in there because Bernie did an interesting thing where we had already started the phrase and she said, you're going to go through. And I think sometimes singing teachers can trick their students into getting a longer phrase by not telling them that they're going to have to go through. And then they are able to do it. They just probably wouldn't have pushed themselves in that way until they got that prompt from the director. So I love that trick.
Thank you. I have another question. Which is better, singing from score or off score? It's an interesting question, and I'll answer briefly because I don't have an answer for it that's definitive, because different things for different times. And I know, for example, in high competition level, you're just expected to do everything from memory. That's just, it's black and white. And if you're doing something quite light, I think it's good to be off score as well. So, for example, Leanne and Paul would both have experience of singing in small ensembles where you actually can't have a score in front of you. But the other side of that is you can't possibly memorize all your repertoire. And I know that my life would be very uninteresting if I only performed music that was memorized. So if you want to build a good repertoire, I think you have to use the scores. And then there are times and places.
Yeah, I think people kind of feel more connected with the audience as soon as you remove the score, and like even these stands, I think sometimes can be intimidating for the audience to come in and see the stands. So if you are performing from memory, you do have that connection with the audience, but it's a means to an end. We do so much repertoire, and we've only got like 5 days to put it together, so we do need to use the score. But I, like with my vocal group that I sing with, we always perform from memory, and it's about being connected with each other as well as being connected with the audience.
And telling the story, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like if you've got images that you want to create, I think the range of vocal colour that you can generate without a score is much broader. But you know, if you're doing polyphony or contemporary music where you need the cues that are there in the music to perform it, then inevitably you're going to be using music.
Absolutely.
So it's important to be able to do both.
It is, actually. I think that's the best answer, is it's important to be able to do both. And I think it's quite limiting if a choir only does repertoire from memory. You know, how much can you get through in a year? Very little, really. And there is just so much music out there that we all have to explore in our lifetimes. Okay, I'm going to move on to vowel pronunciation. There's a question here. I was recently made director of a long-established church choir. They're a good choir, but their vowels are terrible. Where do I begin to fix that? Okay, I'm going to give briefly my end of it. First of all, that our singing vowels are different to our speaking vowels. And if I ask each of these singers, who are all from different parts of the country or world, to say vowels as they speak them, they'll be quite different from each other. So with the singing vowels, I love there's an American way where they have visual gestures for every vowel, but the ah vowel, the drop jaw, ah, like amen, and everything relaxed, the tongue sitting down, and space at the back, ah, and then eh, jaw comes closed down a little bit, eh, and then e. E, I think, is a desperate one in Ireland because we tend to go e. We make our e's very narrow and shrill. And I think one thing that will help with that is a bit of space, e, 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 to make the e a little bit longer. O. Our O's could be like Gloria or Gloria or Gloria. Like we could have any a different amount of O's, but glow, it's quite a big one, and I think you need to be able to put a pinky finger, o, Gloria, and then the last one, ooh, very small, ooh, a little bit like our straw exercise. So I'm going to ask you just to sing with me. We'll do just the ng before each of the vowels, because the gets your mouth in the right position for it. Let's go there. So continuous. What a beautiful sound. Very, very nice vowels. I'm going to ask our singers to not be their usual professional selves now, and we're going to sing a little bit of Locus Iste, and I'm going to ask them to sing it with their own accented vowels, okay? So...
Regional vowels.
And so Mullingar, Leanne, Kerry.
English, Manchester.
New Zealand.
Yeah, so we have got 4 completely different vowel sets here. Okay, so I'm going to give you a C. Thank you. You win. Very, very good. So, maybe that's hard to hear, but it wasn't as beautiful as you've just heard them singing their vowels just before that. So I'm going to ask them now to get rid of all the consonants. So instead of a locus, it'll be ocus instead of o, u, e, a. Yeah? So let's leave out the vowels. Consonants. I mean...
Still singing regional accents? Or?
No, sorry. Thank you for that question. Now if you can...
And the point being that there's no correct accent or pronunciation. It's about reaching a consensus.
Exactly. And it's about the good singing vowels, the primary singing vowels,
Yes.
you know? Okay, so with our beautiful vowels and no consonants. Very good, yeah. And then we put the consonants back in. I suppose most of our singing consists of vowels, doesn't it? It's really, the vowel is where you open your mouth and most of the sound is the vowel, and then the consonants just kind of punctuate it. One little thing before we leave that, the factus est, just because we were talking about ensemble earlier, that the ends of words are often an issue. So factus est, that we all need to put our st exactly together, but it's on a decrescendo. We'll just do that bar. Can you do the factus est bar? Beautiful. Okay. Over
What's useful in that exercise is that the E comes straight after the U of locus, locus is. And those two vowel sounds are really very connected in many ways. But this is something that singing teachers will be able to illustrate. So if somebody is directing a choir and they find the vowel sounds are all over the place, the first step is really talk about singing teaching for your members, for your choir members. Ideally, even the same singing teacher
Ideally.
It takes several of them. And we'll discuss vowel sounds and how really all the vowel sounds essentially are one in a way. There shouldn't be such great differences between them, as you demonstrated with the E sound and mouth shapes.
And I think going from the ooh, if you keep the space from the ooh, rather than going ooh-ee, ooh-ee.
And E is really a form of an ooh.
Yes.
In terms of space
Yeah.
required.
Yeah, and I mean, that is the thing. Their vowels are very different, but they're actually very similar in lots of ways as well. Okay, I think I have another question for you. Next one. In my choir, there's one line, tenors, that brings down the intonation of the whole group. How do you fix that? Well, you can't ever be unpleasant to tenors because we never have enough. So you have to treat your tenors like gold and help them to intonate better. Intonation is tied in with all the things earlier about the body being relaxed and the lips, the tongue, the jaw, allowing the space to sing. But I mean, sometimes intonation is to do with a venue being really cold. I remember singing somewhere there was 2 degrees, and when you breathed, you could see the condensation. So as long as you've got good circumstances, it's not too hot, not too cold, nobody is sick, nobody is in a very bad place in their lives, then it's really, I think, about the individual, first of all, that they have to understand distance between notes. They have to understand intervals, and it makes me think of a violinist who has to learn where to put the fingers on the fingerboard, but it has to become automatic. It has to be muscle memory. It can't be trying to figure out, oh, does it go here or here? So I think the same thing with the voice, that we have to develop a muscle memory for where the notes come from. And that's also to do with our inner ear, how well we audiate. Can we hear inside sound? Can we look at a page and imagine what that sound is like? So there's a kind of a whole journey of maybe musicianship development and that as well.
Can I just speak up for the tenors? Keep going. But you know, the tenor line is a funny one because it sits higher in the voice than most other voice types. And I think often that sound can stick out and we get inhibited by lovely conductors who we need and we love.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. But it's interesting that this came straight from vowels because the tenor vowels, I think, need particular care, and you need to be making the same vowel in a section, and they need to build on the vowel that's beneath them, that from the bass line. And it's, I think the worst thing you can do to a tenor section is to say you flat, you flat, you flat, and try and get them to compensate for that. Because a choir that listens to the top of the sound and tries to kind of ratchet it up the whole time, it's not a healthy vocal place to be. So look after your tenor section, teach them to sing the same vowel together, and build on the sound that's coming next to them or behind them from the bass section, and I think you'll get lots of improvement.
And do you find, as a tenor, that once the section knows the music or knows the line, you mentioned about linking in with the bass sound, can it help in some scenarios to mix singers, mix tenors and basses, scramble them really, to connect that sound, or does that make it more difficult?
It depends on the group. I know there have been many groups where some of the tenors aren't as confident as the others, and I think generally to keep them together so they can work together and support each other's singing is probably the best thing to do. But yeah, if you want to try it, it does build the confidence of singers to get scrambled up like that. But yeah, we need to be able to hear the bass line. I think that's the most important thing.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in to Kodai's Eshtidal, this beautiful piece. It's probably his most famous piece, which is about a young soldier who's asking for peace that night, for somewhere safe to sleep, just to get through to the next day. So it starts with a long bass line, and then, as in, it lasts for the whole page, actually, and we're not going to ask Paul to do that. And then the tenor comes in a fifth higher, and then the alto comes in on the third. So it's a perfect, almost exercise for intonation. So I'm going to ask these brilliant singers to be less than brilliant. So Paul will start off with his F, and Christopher will come in with the C, and then I'm going to ask Leanne to be less than perfect on the A, the third, with whatever she wants to do with it.
You're like a
We can go for a hum now, if you can manage that. Okay, it was a little bit more perfect than we wanted, so Jan, it's very hard to ask a singer to sing something that's not quite in tune. But it was a very small sound and it needed to balance a little bit more. We'll go on a little bit this time, and if you want to, because there are only one of you on each line, if you want to open your mouths slightly, that'd be fine, and that'd be nice for Charlotte just to come in for 2 bars or so. Yeah. It would be nice, wouldn't it, to sing the whole thing? Maybe if we've time left at the end, we can sing a little bit more of it. But thank you for that. One other thing about the intonation, the singer has to be aware of his or her own voice first. And then the next thing is the singers around them, to be aware of the singers around them, like Christopher was talking about. And then the next thing is to be able to hear other sections, to what's going on in the bass line if you're singing soprano. So it's a whole kind of an awareness and maybe experience as well, with time building that up. Okay, I'm going to move on to a new question. Is it easy to go from singing solo to singing with a choir, or is it a nightmare? Do you have to sing differently?
I'd say as a soprano, we are the ones that are maybe more often put in a position where, as choir singers, we have to sing with a very often straight tone or pure tone. But as soloists, we may want to have a more full colour and a freer vibrato. And what I would say is that the most important thing is to keep your voice as flexible as possible. Keep your vocal technique and your vocal health in tip-top condition, and keep your repertoire versatile, so that your voice can adapt and you have as many different colours in your voice as possible, so that because even in choirs we're given such variety of repertoire and different colours are required for different pieces. So you want to kind of have as many tools in your toolkit with your voice as possible. And I've been in operas where we've been asked for a more choral sound, and I've been in choirs where I've been asked for a more operatic sound. So there's not one right or wrong, but you want to feel like you can sing as many different styles in as confident a way as possible.
Thank you. And I really like that answer, because from my point of view, a conductor, I'm happy to have any kind of singer in a choir as long as they're a good musician and the voice is basically good. So if it's a big voice, if it's a small voice, but I suppose you honed in on something interesting there as well, the flexibility to be able to do the different styles, to be able to have the straight tone if you're singing something early, and that's what a conductor wants, or to be able to do big vibrato in a bigger piece, you know, that kind of thing. Leanne, you were going to come in there.
Just from my point of view, because the range that I sing in sometimes as an alto, like I would very often sing alto too, and then find that when in the choir, so I find that the range is very low. And then when I come back to my solo repertoire, I'm a high mezzo soprano, and all of a sudden it's quite, differing, and that's a challenge for me personally, coming from being in the choir to singing as a soloist. But it's like as Charlie said, you need to have your own practice and keep those skills and keep it, sing up to your top and sing down to the bottom, and keep everything going until you can kind of have both hats on at any time. And within the choir, we sing as soloists too. We're not just a choir. We have quite often we'd be asked to sing as a solo, and we do a lot of pieces. There are 16 parts where everyone is singing on their own as well. So we do need to have the ability to do both.
And you were soprano.
I was soprano.
Originally
soprano 1.
Soprano 1 down to alto 2.
Yeah, and then tried to sing Britain's War Requiem and decided I'm going to not do this anymore.
I love performing in a group and by myself, and I think it's really useful to be able to do both of those things and to wear both of those caps. Like when you're in a group, you need to be able to listen intensely to the person that's next to you and try and build your sound with them. Whereas when you're a soloist, you really need to lead the music and lead the story that's being told. I think sometimes the dangerous thing when you sing in a group is that you spend so much time kind of manufacturing your sound to blend with what's around you, and that can generate tension in your vocal tract. And I think it's particularly a problem for sopranos and tenors who sing very high in their register, and often in choral writing it's static and it stays up in the upper register, whereas a solo line would always take you back down and prepare the high notes. So I've found it really, really useful to maintain my solo singing, to always make sure that I try and relax my vocal tract after singing heavily in a choral setting. And bringing your speaking voice. I used to come back from choir camps and choir rehearsals, and I'd just be talking like this the whole time because the tension was there so much. And it took a long time to really learn to relax and just relax the muscles in your throat.
And how would you do that?
There's a very super useful exercise which is using vocal fry, which is sort of a creaky door sound. It was taught to me like
Britney Spears.
yeah. So you kind of and that just lets all the tiny little muscles in your larynx that we don't think about and we're not really able to use, but they do get tired, and it just relaxes those at the end of the day so that you can live to fight another day.
It's a brilliant exercise.
There's actually another workshop as part of the festival with Emer McCarthy-Luddy, who is Vocology Ireland, and she will have so much more information on exactly that, the cooling down, warming up, and so check that one out as well.
Okay, I have another question, a technical question. How do you do, this is for Paul, because if we were doing Eshti Dal, you'd have had to sing the F for a whole page, which is impossible. How do you do staggered breathing?
Well, that goes back to the question of ensemble, really, and as Chris mentioned, listening to other people and being aware of other singers. So if you're in your bass section and you have your bass compadre beside you, it's about listening to their breathing and being able to gauge just about how long he'll need to go, and you get in there before him. But the key is, as I say, just to create a seamless sound among your section by taking imperceptible breaths, and that's about coming off the sound just as gently as you then come back in with your sound, so you don't create any interruptions or bumps in the texture. The more you do it, it becomes a little instinctual between the different singers.
Yeah, but in fact, in a choir situation, you often have to set out exactly where somebody is going to breathe, because otherwise, and I've done it myself, standing beside somebody, just breathe at exactly the same time, which you obviously don't do.
Which means you're listening to each other, right? Which is good. But yeah, you need to organise it or have a standing arrangement with your colleagues.
I think with me and Chrissy, we have an arrangement. I'll go first 2 beats of the bar, she'll go third or fourth beat of the bar.
There's another little trick that some musicians use, and they're hiding behind a music stand like this. And if they're reading music that's quite new to them, and they haven't really had time to rehearse much and to plan all these breaths, they use a little physical gesture to show their neighbour that they're about to breathe, and they simply just place a finger on their music stand like this to signal to the partner, don't breathe now, whatever you do, because I'm about to go.
That's great. Okay, I'm the conductor of a good chamber choir. In both my sopranos and my basses, I have 1 or 2 voices that really stand out, and it's hard to get a good blend. We kind of all come back to the same thing, really. Any suggestions? So 1 voice or 2 that stand out. I mean, everything goes back to listening, doesn't it? Like, that's not such an issue. And I think maybe professionals, you're used to listening. That's part of your job, is to listen, to always be aware. Whereas amateur choirs, it's a learning experience, trying to get used to listening to the person beside you, on either side of you. Okay, over to one of you.
It's an interesting one. I'm not really sure why they would be sticking out. Maybe they're trying to hear their own voice. Sometimes I think singers sing a little bit louder so they can hear their own voice, like, am I singing the right note? So maybe that could be something that's happening. But maybe if they try to achieve a mezzo piano sound, as I know singing softly is like a bit of a challenge. So maybe if they worked a bit more on singing mezzo piano and really like establishing this is your mezzo piano sound, and you can sing softly and encouraging that maybe in them. And as well, maybe they need to talk about why are you singing so loudly? Can you hear yourself, or what is the reason that you want to sing a little bit louder?
And something I found good is to divide a choir up into quartets, so one group will sing and everybody else listens, and they start to get used to that, because when you're singing inside a group it's harder to hear. So if you're listening to others, you're thinking, okay, the bass is too loud there, or the soprano is sticking out too much, and the ear is educated a little bit more as well.
Would you ever change where they were positioned within the section?
All the time.
I think that
all
can
the time.
sometimes fix those issues too, right?
Each voice has different colours, and it's a team effort at the end of the day. It's not just about, this person's not the right, sticks out too much and everyone else is right. It's a teamwork thing, and I think as singers we can all be quite precious about our own voice types, but there's sometimes room for adjusting who's on which part. If a certain piece requires a richer tone in the middle parts, if there's a heavier soprano who's got a fuller tone, maybe for that piece, if they're willing, they might consider singing, alto 1 or soprano 2, and having that flexibility within the parts themselves to work for each piece. So have that openness to change part if it works for the piece itself.
And that goes to that whole area of voicing as well, where there are particular people who like to voice choirs, and I think we all do it in our own way in our own choirs. We know which singers should not stand beside each other, and it actually depends on the piece as well. Sometimes for one piece you want these two singers together, but for another piece actually that doesn't work so well. Okay, so I think that's all we've time for. I want to thank Charlotte, Leanne, Christopher and Paul for being such a good sport, for singing for us, for being so good at answering questions. And again, I want to thank Peter Stobart for his invitation to the five of us, and we hope you've learned something from this session this afternoon. Thank you.
How about love? Measuring love, seasons of love, seasons of love. 525,600